This is the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast. I'm Herman K. Trabish. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. In this episode of the podcast series on groups leading the emergence of 21st century power, we're going to talk with Rikki Seguin, Executive Director of the Interwest Energy Alliance, an advocate for clean energy in New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, and Arizona. Rikki's going to describe the Alliance's history, membership, and mission, some of its past accomplishments, and some of its ongoing initiatives to grow affordable, reliable, clean electricity in the West. Rikki's led the Interwest Energy Alliance for over 6 years. Before that, she helped lead Oregon Solar Energy Industries Association, worked with the Oregon Department of Energy, and was policy director for Renewable Northwest. Earlier in her nearly 15-year career in clean energy advocacy, she worked with the Energy Trust of Oregon, Environment New Mexico, and the California Public Interest Research Group. So, Rikki, you were on the run across state lines like a real Western hero for a while, but you've settled down now with a regional group. What is the Interwest Energy Alliance? Who are its members? What's its history? And most importantly, what's its mission?
Well, Herman, thanks so much for having me. And I'm smiling as you go through my history there because yes, I did spend some time in a lot of Western states, but as a born and raised Atlanta girl, it took me some time to get out here. And then once I found the West, I decided, okay, yep, this is the place for me. Like you said, I have been in the role of executive director of the Interwest Energy Alliance, or Interwest, since 2019, but the organization has been around since 2002. So, Interwest, as you said, we work across a 6-state region to promote and create market opportunities for large scale renewable energy, storage, and transmission. We are a trade association, meaning that our membership is made up of industry members, developers of these types of projects who pool their resources together to have an organization like Interwest exist to do advocacy on the industry's behalf. So we work at the state legislatures in all 6 of the states that we cover. We're active at all of the state public utility commissions. And additionally, we do work across state lines in the region on things like regional transmission planning and engaging with those planning forums. I will say that the history of Interwest in a nutshell is interesting too, because when the organization was founded back in 2002, it was really meant to be a single table where members of the environmental community and members of the renewable business community could get together, hash out solutions, and propose them in a way that worked for what maybe we would call both sides, business and conservation. So to this day, Interwest, in our roughly 60 members, we still have 6 of those founding NGOs within the membership too. So we can make sure that the policies that promote renewable development also work from a conservation lens.
Interesting. So you cover 6 legislatures and 6 commissions. So you probably have about 500 employees. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. Actually, we're shooting for the moon this year, and we will grow our staff to 9 full-time employees this summer. After
Wow.
after a very long time of being an organization that just had the executive director and a team of consultants, we now currently have 8 employees on staff, and we still have that amazing team of consultants that represent us around the region.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to know a little bit more about what Interwest has done in terms of leadership in the past. Let's get a little more concrete. Specifically, what kinds of things has Interwest done to advance delivery of large-scale clean electricity?
So it's a good question. It's the question, right? And then it's kind of a hard question to go back and look and say, what specifically did we do to shift the tide in the region? Because when you think about 2002 to 2025, there's been a real shift in the landscape of procuring generation and ensuring that renewables are the leading resource that is being brought online.
Absolutely. I call on another podcast, I called the last couple of decades the most consequential decades in the history of energy since the Edison facility, Pearl Street, came online in 1882 in New York City. So
I love
you're
it.
absolutely right.
I mean, and it's what a cool time to be doing this work. Maybe everybody always says that on your podcast, but maybe everyone in this field has said that for decades or even centuries. But I sure feel that way right now because it does feel like we are inheriting massive change and we are shaping the course of how to adapt to that change. So, some of the types of things Interwest has worked on, we have been on the leading edge of drafting, lobbying for, supporting the implementation of RPS policies around the region, those that
Mm,
are adopted by law, so those in statute in the states that we work in, but also those clean energy targets or RPS targets that are voluntarily set by utilities in states where the legislature may not have required such a mandate. So, setting the goalpost for renewable energy procurement has been something we've worked on both in the legislative and regulatory arena, and then shepherded through the implementation in close partnership, of course, with the utilities who are the ones required to meet those standards. So, ensuring that in a utilities IRP process, renewables are fairly and wholly considered for the benefits that they provide to the utility system and the appropriate costs that should be considered for adopting that type of technology. So,
because
that's thing
people today,
one. Go ahead.
people people today take that those renewable portfolio standards that require or encourage utilities to procure renewables. They take them for granted, but I can remember huge fights, a decade ago or more over them. I interrupted you. Go on, Ricky.
No, well, I think that's so right. I mean, it's funny because again, thinking about this moment that we're in some ways it feels like we're living in a post RPS world where
Yeah.
the RPS is
Mhm.
not what is driving the procurement in most cases. It is the cost of renewables. It is the complementary nature of renewables that is the reason we're seeing the adoption of wind and solar and storage to the scale
Ab-
that we are. But it had to
Absolutely.
start somewhere.
Absolutely. If it hadn't been for those RPSs, we would not have access to the lowest cost electricity sources of electricity, wind and solar and batteries that we have now. That was the how the cost came down. Do you want to move on to the next question, Ricky?
Well, maybe I'll just quickly mention, in addition to things like RPSs, for us on the Interwest side, how these projects get built, in addition to the planning
Oh yeah,
framework that results in utilities procuring these resources, really like brass tacks, how projects get built is a big focus for us. So things like ensuring favorable tax treatment for renewable projects has been big for us. Ensuring that siting policy allows for the continued development of resources, ensuring that transmission exists so that these new generation facilities can actually come online. Those are the other types of projects that Interwest has worked on over the years, and certainly our ongoing projects, which I'm sure we'll talk about next.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's what I wanted to get to. And there's an overlap because I'm sure many of those things are still very much on your agenda. Interwest, I know, has helped advance regional transmission planning and Western wholesale market development. And it's worked with stakeholders on utility resource planning. You mentioned IRPs. That's the integrated resource planning that many years ago folks were reluctant, utilities and commissions were reluctant to do to bring multiple sources of electricity in. And you worked on legislation for energy, which often drove utilities to use that resource planning. So I'm guessing you're still working very hard on those very things. Tell us about your current work and what your goals are right now.
Thanks for that overview. And yes, right, setting that goalpost is so important, and then implementing the policies, making sure that the technology exists, making sure that there's fair market rules that allow for participation of these types of resources. That's all critical to making sure that that goalpost is reachable. So what are some of the things we're working on right now? in the markets space and this regional markets conversation, we are continuing to advocate for market design rules that enable open, competitive participation by both renewables and independent power producers. You know, most of our members have an independent power producer model. So ensuring that competition is present is critical for us and for this transition. We're also continuing to advocate for utilities participation in day ahead markets and moving forward to a full regional transmission organization in the West with the largest market footprint possible. Those are priorities for us in that market space. And in addition to markets, transmission, Interwest is a big supporter of the Western Transmission Expansion Coalition, working to encourage utility participation and robust planning for a West-wide transmission plan. Again, we can't bring renewables on line to the scale we need to meet RPSs if we don't have more transmission. So getting more transmission on is a priority for us. I will say one of our important initiatives over the next year is bringing awareness to how generation planning and transmission planning can and should be linked in the utilities resource planning process to better encourage the utilities to better incorporate that transmission planning when they do their generation planning so that we can move forward with bringing these wires on that we know we absolutely need. And then one last thing that I'll mention, Herman, here is, I mentioned it before, is siting. That applies to transmission. That applies to generation. Everybody has an opinion on where this stuff is getting built right now. And figuring out where there are issues in project siting, what the solutions are in the cases that there are issues is going to be so critical. We can look to the Midwest to see what happens when counties react negatively to renewable energy and put moratoria in place. We see some evidence of that out here in the region. So thinking proactively in the siting conversation to ensure we can meet our clean energy deployment targets is going to be really critical.
Wow, you're at the forefront of the most important debates right now in the power sector. It must be, on the one hand, exciting and perhaps sometimes exhausting. We have done a series on the podcast about the efforts for regional transmission market and transmission system. And Rikki, you have inadvertently forced me to require you to show up again on the podcast when we do a series on permitting and siting in the future.
Can't wait.
Before we get to the last question, I want to ask you one hopefully quick question, which is, the last I checked, the California transmission system operator was developing one regional system, and the Southwest Power Pool, which runs the Plains State transmission system, was developing another kind of integrated system. Are they still sort of, I don't know, what would you call it, working at odds to try and develop parts of the West, or is there any hope of a single system emerging, or are we at the point where we're just going to have two different Western systems?
Boy, that really is the billion-dollar question. The California Independent System Operator has their day-ahead market, the EDAM, that we're seeing Western utilities with open proceedings at their state commissions with their plans to join EDAM. So that's live right now. Example is in Wyoming with PacifiCorp in front of the Wyoming Commission asking to join EDAM. At the same time, we see SPP with their Markets Plus program, their day ahead offering. And we have Public Service Company of Colorado with an open proceeding at the Colorado PUC about joining that. So those are just the day ahead markets. To get to the full RTO is the next step, but it sure doesn't seem like either the CAISO or SPP is slowing down their efforts. They both seem to be actively recruiting Western utilities to participate in their offerings.
Well, there's good news and bad news. Studies show that a single system would save ratepayers more money, but it's good that we have regional systems emerging, I suppose. Let me move to this last question, Rikki. everybody knows the headlines about the Senate processing the House reconciliation bill, and people in the energy world know that that's really critical to what happens to energy in the immediate future. But Interwest has worked mostly at the state and regional levels. So, what political polarization have you seen? Do you see the same kind of political polarization in your work? What policy issues are you working on right now that may or may not have that kind of polarization? And most importantly, what have you learned about working with divided stakeholders at those local levels?
We are absolutely seeing polarization at the state level. But I think really what I've found fascinating this year in particular that we've seen is an emboldening that both your traditionally red and traditionally blue states, they're both feeling emboldened by changes at the federal level. And we're seeing that on display in the legislative sessions. States that may be more aligned with the Trump administration's goals have seemed more inclined this year to very aggressively put forward energy policy that mirrors the federal energy dominance agenda and the components of that which minimize or frankly restrict support for renewable technologies like wind. So I think we're seeing an emboldening from again your more traditionally conservative legislatures this session because they have support at the federal level for those types of policies. We're also seeing it on the left where states that are not aligned with the federal administration's priorities are trying to, what we're hearing them call it, is Trump proof their state. In the case of building renewables, renewables are not blue or red. You know, most renewables are built in very rural, often very conservative counties, districts, and states. So traditional policies on the left around maybe prohibiting building bad stuff, this gets us into the siting space, may make it harder to build renewables too. So we're having to do a dance here where both the left and the right seem emboldened by what's happening in DC. And for renewables, there's room for us to exist in either paradigm, but it sure takes a lot of work. We're not one party or the other. Renewables are not just in one place or the other. We are part of the energy dominance agenda, and it's been important to really highlight that, give examples of the manufacturing jobs, the construction jobs, the economic development injection that is coming into the most rural parts of the states where we work in. And what have I learned? Gosh, it's so often repeated, but listening matters and early engagement matters. You know, what do communities really want to see about renewable energy? Someone could vote for President Trump and also want to see a major injection of capital in their family farm from having a wind project come on there. So listening what people and communities really want, and highlighting those direct needs to the decision makers at the state or regional level is really important for us.
Wow. Well, be careful. You work in a lot of states where open carry laws are in place, so you have to be on your toes. But more realistically, Rikki, there's going to come a time, I believe, when people are going to remember that all of the above on a level playing field is the way to go, and that green is the new red, white, and blue, as was said many, many years ago, more commonly. But that's all the time we have. I want to thank my guest, Interwest Energy Alliance Executive Director Rikki Seguin. She's described Interwest's history, membership, and mission, some of its past accomplishments, and its ongoing initiatives to navigate between divided stakeholders and grow affordable, reliable, clean electricity in the West. Not a controversial concept, really. I also want to thank our listeners for taking the time to check out the USEA Power Sector Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with everybody you know our quest for energy transition solutions.